Welcome to Sausage on a Fork, a podcast dedicated to the UK's longest running children's drama programme, Grange Hill. My name's Neil, and in each episode I'll interview a former cast member about their life before, during and after their time on the programme. Okay, welcome to the latest episode of Sausage on a Fork, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I have been joined for this episode by none other than David Crane, who played Barry Timpson. David, welcome to Sausage on a Fork.
How you doing, Neil? You all right?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Thanks so much for coming on. What we'll do, David, is we'll start the way we start every episode. And if you can tell us how you first got into acting.
Oh, wish I could remember, Neil. I was very young. It started with my brother. My brother was a sort of child model.
Right.
He did a lot of sort of catalogue work, things like that. And she sort of got involved in a child modelling agency when she was pregnant with me. Right. And then as soon as she had me, she just joined me straight up. So right. from probably less than 1 year old, I was doing sort of baby modelling, catalogues, modelling clothes and all that sort of stuff. Did my first sort of TV when I was about 3, I think. Did a few adverts. And it sort of went on like that. And then I joined Sylvia Young's Saturday school.
Right.
And me and my elder brother, Terry, we did the Saturday school for a little while. And then I got the opportunity to go full-time. So we both joined full-time, me and Terry.
Uh-huh.
He didn't stay for very long. I ended up staying for about 3 years. And in the meantime, I got the part in Simon and the Witch.
All right, yeah.
That for a few years.
Yeah.
And then when I got to about, I suppose it would have been about 10 years old, when I would have normally gone into a normal comprehensive school. I didn't want to be at Sylvia Young's. I didn't ever feel like I fitted in very well there.
Uh-huh.
So I decided that I wanted to just go to my local comp and be with my friends, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's what I did. I left Sylvia's and joined a normal comprehensive and then got the part straight away in Grange Hill.
Right, well, if I can just go back to Simon and the Witch, because obviously that's like, that's the first thing I remember you being in. You played Jimmy, and obviously Jimmy was very, very different to the character that you eventually got in Grange Hill. He was...
I don't know.
I mean, I think Jimmy is sort of had like the weight, felt like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders at times.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
But just looking back at that was your first acting job? Like telly job, was it?
It wasn't my first telly job.
Oh, right.
I've done lots of commercials and things before. And obviously I did all the Sylvia Young theatre shows and did sort of a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was the first thing that I became known in, where people were recognising me. It was from Simon and the Witch, because they've got a real good following.
Yeah, it was massive.
Fantastic stars in
that's
in that show.
Joan Sims for the kick-off.
Joan Sims, Lizzie Spriggs, Joe Grossi, Nicola Stapleton, of course. Miss, was her name Miss Moneypenny? Naomi Harris.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but also, and there were some cameos in there, because when I looked through the cast list, John Craven and Michael Fish turned up in there as well. But for you as a kid, did you know how big the likes of Joan Sims and Liz Spriggs were?
No, my dad had told me about the Carry On film, so I'd seen the odd Carry On film. But at that age, I mean, I must have been 8, 9, 10 when I was doing Simon and the Witch.
Uh-huh.
No, I didn't know. But then I didn't really know that my life was that much different to my peers, because I knew nothing else.
Yeah.
From a very early age, I've always been in film sets, studios.
Yeah.
I knew nothing else. So it didn't seem that weird to me.
Yeah. And I was looking again, and there was another thing called, it was a TV movie called Infantile Disorders.
Oh, God, yeah.
Now, that just caught my eye because Alison McLaughlin was in that, and Alison McLaughlin had been in Grange Hill playing, she was called Louise Webb in Grange Hill. So she had an older sister called Cheryl Webb. Alison McLaughlin went to America with the Just Say No campaign, so she was one of them kids there. And then there was a program called Traffic with Bill Patterson, Lindsay Duncan in 1989. There was an episode there.
Just like a drug runner, I think.
Ah, right, okay.
Right.
Yeah. So then, you mentioned then about going into Grange Hill and getting the part of Barry Timpson. But was that the part that you auditioned for?
I think it was.
Right.
Can't remember.
Uh-huh.
But I always thought, how badly cast am I? Because, well, John was shorter than me, thankfully,
Yeah.
but I've always been a bit of a hobbit
Right.
and not a convincing bully at all.
Right.
And at that period of my life, I'd been bullied a lot.
Right. I
I'd
get
never
you.
been the bully. It was funny actually listening to Carl Pitsey recently
Right.
talking about some of the stuff that he used, the antics he used to get up to at Sylvia's,
Yeah.
because I was the victim of a lot of that.
Right. Okay.
A lot of the little fights he used to organise,
Right.
I was generally one of the two that had to have a fight,
Right.
and I didn't always want to be there, but it did make me laugh listening to him, and because I'd sort of forgotten a lot of that. But yeah, for them to me to turn up in Grange Hill and just be a 3'9" bully was bizarre. Because when I was in senior school, I think when I was in the third year, I was still the smallest kid in school.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, not
Yeah.
particularly convincing.
So, had you been a fan of Grange Hill?
Yeah, oh for sure. Who wasn't?
Right, yeah, yeah. So what was it like then? I know you've mentioned about like your peers and it was what you'd known before, but what was it like going from being a fan of the program and then all of a sudden you're sat in a room with like proper Granger legends like John Drummond and Ian Congdon Lee and Simone
It
Hyams
was.
and people like
I
that.
was a little bit worried about meeting John Drummond and
Right.
it was is it Josh
Josh
Fenton?
Josh Fenton, yeah.
Yeah, because their character scared me a little bit.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the rest of the time, it just felt like I was back at Sylvia Young's because I knew
Right.
most of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Jamie Lahane was my bestie in
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Sylvia's, so
Yeah.
I knew him very well. And then, of course, the Buckfields,
Yeah.
of course. So I knew a lot of the characters.
Yeah.
So
Brilliant, brilliant.
it's a bit of a home from home.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll look at your time on Granger. We'll look at some of Barry's stories. So you never joined in the first year. Barry was a second year
Yeah,
when we first saw him, and in his
he never had the
first.
class though, did he?
No. Well, that was the other
No.
thing. I think he was the only featured pupil in that year group,
Right, yeah,
because Grange Hill usually did like a year, then they'd miss a year, and then they'd bring another year in. And obviously, because Neil Timpson had started, and it's mentioned that he's going to be twice as bad because his older brother Barry's here. And the first scene that they're in, Neil and Barry, is they're watching a Keith walk across the playground having a conversation with his older sister Aisha, and he was worried about getting his head flushed down the toilet. Which is a massive concern for kids of that age, isn't it?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
everyone thinks it's going to happen. And when they hear that, Barry and Neil just sort of like just looked at each other and just give each other a bit of a knowing glance, giving us the idea that maybe they'd be up to no good. And like you said, Alice and Becky were there saying Neil Timpson was going to be twice as bad because of having Barry with him. And we then saw Barry and Neil arguing with Julie Corrigan over a dog that she had hold of. Because I don't know if you remember, you just mentioned Jamie Lahane.
Yeah.
Well, his character Jacko had the dog, and for the first few episodes of that series, his dog featured quite heavily because his dog always got out and always followed him to school. Like, now the Simpsons were claiming that the dog was theirs, but Julie didn't believe them. And then Becky and Alice came over and let the dog go and told the Simpsons to clear off. Jacko and his mates then turned up looking for the dog, and it was the Simpsons sent them the wrong way.
Yeah. Actually, I don't remember the dog. Yeah. Don't remember them early. It's really weird because I've watched some of the episodes back, and it's really weird. It's normally if you're looking at a home video or something you did years ago, you can sort of remember it and it sort of comes back to life.
Yeah.
But watching some of these episodes of Grange Hill, I have no recollection, even having watched it.
Right.
Do not remember being there with them people saying those lines in that situation. There was one where a bit later on we're at a fashion show with Mick and the gang. I don't remember that. I don't remember ever being there. And you'd think that was something you would remember.
Yeah.
But no, didn't remember that at all.
Right. Okay. And Barry sort of told the girls for getting rid of the dog that he'd be seeing them a bit later on. Like you said there about the bullies and like the being the worst bullies, but when you look at them at the first, they just seem to be like disruptive kids. You know what I mean? They were annoyances more than anything. Things like like when Brian was waiting for his mates to turn up,
Yeah.
and they walked past and told him that they'd seen his mates getting into having a bit of a scrap on the way to school, and so Brian ran off to help him and ended up being late for school, and it was just like little things like that. However, Barry and Neil were responsible for one of the greatest pranks ever on Grange Hill. It's one of the oldest pranks ever in the history of the world.
Cling film.
But putting the cling film
Yeah.
on the toilet. And I love it because there's so much goes on in that scene. Getting them other two lads to stand by they thought it through. Do you know what I mean? They thought it through. They got them other two lads to stand by the urinal. They put the cling film over the toilet and they went into the other two cubicles, meaning the only one that anyone could use was that middle one, which Locho went into. And obviously, the inevitable happened. And what I love about that scene is like that he comes out and obviously Neil and Barry are laughing at him, but then it moves on. But then a couple of scenes later, it goes back into the toilets, and those two lads are still standing there, like wondering if they were allowed to move. And I just love that. I just think it's so funny the way they done it. Like now, Barry and Neil started playing a game called Satellite. Now I don't know if you remember Satellite, which involved holding hands and spinning round in a circle. I've got to ask you, did you have much preparation for that one?
No, that was a new one on me. Yeah, just do as we was told.
Now, this is where we first, I mentioned the key earlier on, but this is where we first sort of see any kind of like hatred towards Akeek, because Akeek joined in and he seemed quite happy until it was Barry told him to get off, saying, we weren't letting you join in, and then Cleaver then asked Barry if he could join in, and Barry said he could. So Trevor got hold of Barry's hands and just squeezed it and squeezed it and squeezed it, causing Barry to scream and shout. And we then again, Akeek was laughing at that, and Barry has another go at Akeek again. And then when they play it again, Neil crashed into Akeek, causing him to fall over. And Neil and Barry sort of grab Akeek's bag and were about to start on him until Jacko and his mates come over. And at that time, the Timpsons then like shouted sort of like racial slurs at Akeek.
Oh, I know.
And run off. Now, I always think, like when I was a lot younger and Grange Hill was on, and there was people like Gripper and stuff in it, it was that was the whole point of like one of Gripper's storylines, was that he was a massive racist.
Right.
But to still be showing that in like the early 90s, because I think it was like series 13 in like 1990 you joined, but still showing that then on a kids TV program.
Yeah.
It's still it was quite shocking then, you know what I mean?
Right.
And was it, and I know it might sound like a daft question and you might not be, but was it difficult playing a character, not just like an annoyance, but to actually be a racist character?
Honestly, I wouldn't have been thinking like that at all.
Right.
I would have been just reading the lines I was given and not thinking too deeply about it, to be honest. At that age, I know I've got kids that age now. I've got a 12-year-old now. And he wouldn't be thinking about it.
Yeah, because there was another, like, there's a scene later on where in the canteen, and the Simpsons were sat at the same table as Akeek, and they were having a go, like, and they were using things like, you lot, why don't you lot go back to your own country and stuff like that. And although it wasn't sort of like overtly racist like the Gripper stuff was, it was still there that they had like racist tendencies, and the fact that it had come from their parents as well.
But there would have been a lot of that at that time anyway, wouldn't there?
Yeah. That then led to the fact that Jacko and his mates were saying, like, we're going to get the Simpsons back for what they've just called you. And Akeek was like, look, I've heard it all before. They'll get bored and all that. But Jacko and his mates wouldn't let it go. And when they were playing Satellite, okay, so the Simpsons were playing it again.
Yeah.
Can you remember how Jacko and his mates got them back?
No, I've got to say I don't remember.
So they had a net that they'd nicked from the gym.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do remember. Yes.
No, when I watched that the other day, when they jump on them with the net and they float, there's a fair few digs getting thrown in. I've
Right.
got to say, there's a fair few digs getting thrown from both sides. It has to be said, like, which I suppose if Jamie was your mate, then that's what mates do, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, when we saw that, there was another one where the Simpsons were chasing a key again,
Right.
and they had them cornered down in the basement
Right.
until an older lad, Raju, turned up claiming he could do karate.
Oh, the Cole Pitsy.
Yeah, Carl turned
Yeah.
up, yeah. And he was there with like Justine and the girls, and he threatened them, and they walked off. But later on, as revenge, they locked Justine and Chrissy in the room in the basement because that's where they were doing their t-shirts.
Right.
And they were spray painting the t-shirts, and it actually nearly killed them, which would have been an interesting storyline for the Simpsons there. So yeah, so there was a hunger lunch initiative going on at the school, and Jacko and his mates, who'd become like the money makers, like without menacing, like the Simpsons were trying to do, decided that they were going to sell chili con carne at lunchtime. And they were, because they were making it in cookery class. But little Simpson Neil had poured a whole tub of chili powder into it because he knew they were going to do something with it, but he didn't know what it was. And when Barry saw them selling it, him and his mate Lee, I don't know if you remember Lee, the blonde lad. Barry had a mate at this point called Lee. They must have realised that he was they needed someone else in the year group. So it was a blonde kid called Lee, and they ran over and demanded free food from them. And before Neil could tell them what he'd done, Mrs. Munro came over and saw what was going on. One of the kids said it was too hot, and because she'd seen what Barry and Lee were doing, she made them eat the chili con carne, and she made Neil eat it as well. Now, while I'm talking about Mrs. Munro, I always say this to everyone: we have to talk about Anna Quayle.
Yeah,
what an absolute legend, Anna Quayle.
I've since learned. Yeah. Neil, I had no idea.
Right.
And at that time, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang would have been on in my house all the time because my sister used to just watch films again and again and again. Wizard of Oz, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And I only found out, I think, through this podcast, listening to you, that she was the Queen character in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And I'd never put the two together. So at the time I worked with her, I didn't realise it was her.
But what was it like just working with her anyway? You know, just...
Oh, she was fantastic. Yeah. All the teachers were. The teachers were great. Stuart, Lee Corns, was it?
Yeah.
Hankin.
Yeah,
he was cracking. Yeah, all of them, all of the adults. But if just fantastic, loved it.
And I always say, like Grange Hill, you can see how good Grange Hill was because of the likes of those people within it as adult actors, like Anna Quayle and Stuart Organ, Lee Corns, all those people you've just mentioned. The fact that they were in it shows that it must have been a good program. You know what I mean? For
I'm
them.
Sure it wasn't so much of a pleasure for them working with us, though. Because I'll be honest with you, I was a bit of a scally when I was at when I was at Grange Hill. I didn't take it particularly seriously at first.
Right.
I had a few sit downs with the directors and.
Right, okay.
Tone it down. I'll tell you, I had a real massive problem with laughing, corpsing during the scenes. That scene where it was Brian Shaw sitting on the wall, we sent him the wrong way, so his mates were in trouble. It took us so long to film that scene.
Really?
I couldn't stop laughing. And when you've got a group of lads, group of mates, and one starts, it starts everyone else off. I was the trigger. That was a nightmare. And I acted for quite a long time. I never really got that out of my system. I used to corpse all the time. I did a sitcom with Brian Connolly, and he would not stick to script. If he changed the script on me, he would make me laugh.
Yeah.
Just ruin the scene, and we'd have to do it again. And we'd be doing sitcoms. So we've got a live studio audience, and he was killing me, going off script. I'm sat there trying to keep a straight face. It was really difficult for me. I always struggled with that.
He must have known what he was doing there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
Another legend.
like we've said there, the Simpsons were more of an annoyance than bullies at first, and they never seemed to get the upper hand, really, did they? Whatever thing they did, it always seemed to backfire on them. Because we just mentioned that the chili powder there, but do you remember when they put laxatives in the hot chocolate?
Yeah.
And they offered it to Locho and Brian, claiming it was a peace offering. But unfortunately, Morley had seen them put it in the hot chocolate, and he told Mrs. Munro, who then made Barry drink it. And Barry then asked Mrs. Munro if he could go, and Mrs. Munro said, "Well, if you need to." And we then saw him legging it through the school, legging it to the toilet. And it was always Mrs. Munro that seemed to catch them as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Always brilliant. Okay, so then we move on to the next year, which was Series 14 on air in 91. And Barry was in the third year by now. And Nick and Richard sold Barry a piece of the Berlin Wall in inverted commas. So he say it even had a bullet hole in it, and the German word for demon killer was what they told him. Barry thought he had a bargain. He paid them £2 for it and ran off. And later on, one of my favourite lines ever in Grange Hill, when he showed it to Mr. Van der Groot, who told him it wasn't German, but it was gibberish. One of my favourite lines, honestly, can you remember what Barry said? Can you remember what he said?
Does he say, gibberish? Where's that from? Gibraltar?
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I just think brilliant. I just love that. Where's that? Gibraltar? But yeah, brilliant. Now, for some reason, in this series of Grange Hill, they had a big thing about radio-controlled cars.
Yeah.
And Barry and Neil had a car that they were racing for money, and they said they'd hired it for the day, but they'd actually nicked it from Richard. And obviously Richard played by Desmond Askew.
There's Askew,
yeah. Another acting legend there. And Barry was winning the race, but he crashed it, and then Richard came running around the corner. So Barry and Neil ran off, and they didn't actually pay Dominic any of the money for Dominic winning the race, which is probably one of the few times where the Timpsons actually had the upper hand on someone, to be honest. Jacko and his mates had taken over Trevor's pizza business. There was a big thing where, obviously it started because of the hunger lunches and all that. Trevor and Ted had been selling the pizzas, and then Jacko and his mates took over. Barry and his mates were watching them. And when they sort of finished, they started chasing them for the money. But this time they got caught by Mr. Hargreaves,
right?
Who played by Kevin O'Shea.
Yeah,
and I love the character of Mr. Hargreaves, because he came in after Mr. Bronson.
Yeah,
but he was such a different. He was more of a caricature, wasn't he? He was more of a cartoon than Mr. Bronson was. And I always liken him to. Do you remember the British Empire?
Yeah,
I always liken him to Gordon Brittas there. And so when they got caught by Hargreaves, they had to then tidy the playground. They were there to clean the playground up. And also, Trevor had put tomato ketchup in Neil Timpson's bag, but the Timpsons thought it was Jacko that had done it. So can you remember what they did to get Jacko back? It involves the pizzas.
No, you've got me. No.
So they painted the pizzas that they were selling. They painted them red, so they couldn't sell them at lunchtime. But I don't actually think the scene is shown. You just hear Jacko and Locho talking to Trevor about the fact that all the pizzas had been painted. But that's how they got them back. Now, we've mentioned the fact that there was radio-controlled cars there. And there was also a model boat race.
Right, no, so, don't remember that. Was I there for that?
Barry and Neil were running a book on it.
Oh, okay.
Obviously. They were running a book on who was going to win. There was a steam-powered boat and there was an electric boat. So they thought the electric boat was going to win by miles. So they were offering really long odds on the steamboat winning, when they couldn't understand why people started backing the steam powered boat, and then they realised that there was going to be a payload put on the electric boat to like match it up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the steam powered boat won, and they claimed they had no money to pay out. So Ray, another legend, Kelly George,
Oh,
Ray and his mates chased them to get it from them. Now, I watched that scene, and you don't actually see anything, but you just hear sort of a lot of screams and a lot of cries because all these 6 foot lads were beating up the 3 foot bullies, shall we say? And I mean, I've just mentioned Kelly George there. Like, obviously, like I think everyone who was a child actor at the time knew who he was. Like,
yeah.
I've heard he was a legend amongst the kids.
Well, I knew Kelly from Sylvia Young's, and
Yeah,
Kelly really used to look after me. I used to get bullied quite badly at Sylvia Young's, and
right.
I remember one particular day I was getting picked on in the downstairs toilets at Sylvia's, and Kelly walked in, and I was being pretty ganged up on.
Yeah,
Kelly came in, knew who he was at school, but didn't really know him, and then he sorted them all out. He pulled me to one side and said, "Listen, you get on the same train as me, don't you?" I was like, "Yeah." He went, "In future, you come home with me."
right.
And I would just, and yeah, so I just come on. I used to walk with Kelly, get on the train with Kelly. I was, I was only 8 or 9 years old. I mean, it's crazy to think I used to
Yeah.
travel 2.5 hours to school
Wow.
at 8, 9 years old on my own.
Yeah. Wow.
Got like 2 tubes, an overground train, a bus. I used to do that journey in and out of London on my own. So to have
Wow.
someone like Kelly, who was quite a lot older than us,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how old Kelly is, but he
Right.
must be at least 5 or 6 years older than us.
Uh-huh.
And he was a senior when I was a primary school kid. And yeah, so to have someone like that have my back was
Yeah.
amazing. And then
Yeah.
when he turns up at Grange Hill, we spent a lot of time together. He was
Yeah.
quite close to my sister as well. We used to do loads of stuff. He was the only person I saw after Grange Hill, actually.
Right.
We used to go and do stuff together. But
Yeah.
yeah, absolute legend. You'll never hear a bad word said about Kelly
Yeah.
George.
No.
Absolute
Yeah.
legend.
Yeah. Everyone said the same. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
No, we mentioned the pizza business
Yeah.
earlier on. This time, Akeek and Julie Corrigan were looking after the pizza business. So, two fairly easily pushed over characters. Barry and Neil tried to muscle in so that they could claim the money, but it was Julie. Julie stood their ground this time, and sent them packing. And that they walked off with the tail between their legs that time. Like, and I don't know if you remember Barry's CD player. He'd lent it to Neil, and Neil had lost it.
No.
So they went looking for it. It actually ended up under a bottle bank when the bottle banks had been replaced on the playground. It ended up under there, and they went looking for it in the lockers, and they were found by Mr. Hargreaves, who accused them of stealing. So they were banned from the end of term dance. The end of term dance was actually Mrs. McCluskey's leaving dance as well, like, because there's another legend, Gwyneth Paltrow, like.
Yeah.
That must have been Scowen. Like, we've mentioned the likes of, you mentioned the likes of being there and being intimidated by Josh Fenton and
Yeah.
and John Drummond, but to walk into a room and see Mrs. McCluskey as well,
But she was nothing like Mrs.
yeah,
McCluskey. She was so lovely.
yeah,
She was so lovely. She was like
yeah,
the mum of set, She was,
yeah.
yeah. She
What
was
was it?
fantastic.
I think someone's mentioned there, like the queen of, or the mother of the company. That was
Yeah,
what
exactly
we
that.
said. Like,
Exactly that. Yeah.
yeah. So, the lads were banned from the end of term dance. And it's weird at the end, because there's a scene where the Timpsons go into a phone box and ring the fire brigade and say there's a fire at Grange Hill, but nothing comes of that. Like,
No.
you don't see the fire, like the fire engines turn up or anything. It's really weird that they kept it in, like, because
Yeah.
you'd think there was going to be some sort of consequence to it, but it's not. It doesn't happen, and it just seems strange that
Yeah.
they kept it in. Now we have to talk then about the next series, because obviously John Pickard left.
Yeah.
Right? Did they ever say to you, well, then that's the end of your time on Grange Hill, or was it a case of you staying on?
I don't ever remember having any conversations like. The only one I remember is the one that when they said, "Listen," just at the end of my
Right.
last year, they said, "Look, there's no way Barry's coming sixth form."
Yeah, yeah.
So he won't be back next year. He just wouldn't. It
Yeah.
just wouldn't be realistic. So I knew that then was my time. But
Right.
no, I didn't realise. I'm not sure I knew John wasn't coming back.
Ah, right. Okay.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure I knew that. But then when Joe Poby, got to get him on, Joe Poby, um, of course, Jamie and Chris,
Yeah.
when they joined, we still didn't have a class.
No, no.
So I must be the only character that did 4 years without a classroom scene because I was never in a classroom.
No. So, yeah, I mean, Neil left, but that was never mentioned. It was never addressed, the fact that Timpson's little brother wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
But how did you feel about John going? Or when you found out that he'd gone, like?
I don't honestly, Neil. I don't remember.
Right.
I don't remember. I mean, I got on well with John. I enjoyed working with John. He was such a character, so funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember. I just remember coming back, and then I had this new gang,
Yeah.
and I was the butt of all the jokes.
Yeah.
So where I went from being the big Timpson, I was now in this other gang where I was just being laughed at by the other three. I was a bit of a Klingon, wasn't I?
Yeah. So now Barry's in the fourth year, and these three, he's got some mates, Mick, Frank, and Grimbo. Grimbo's name was Graham, and occasionally he was called Graham, but most of the time he was called Grimbo. And they were all smokers, and there's a scene where Barry's trying to buy cigarettes, but the newsagent asked him how old he was, and he said he was 16. And she says, "So you were born in
London."
Yeah. So you were born in, and you were born in, and his answer was London, and I loved that. So then she says, "So what year were you born in?" So he says 1977. So she pointed out that would have made him 14. So he goes, "Oh yeah, 1979." So she goes, "Oh, so now you're 12." So he walks out without any. And Mick, Joe Poby is one of the best most convincing bullies, I think, because he's horrible in Grange Hill. He was horrible, wasn't he? He makes Barry smoke a cigarette, and Barry coughs all over the place because, let's be honest, he was never used to it, was he? Like, but this might be quite a personal question, but were you a smoker?
Yeah, we were. All of us were.
Right. So.
Yeah, we were. I hope my mum don't listen to this. Yeah, we all were. Yeah.
Right. But like we said, his mates, shall we call them? I mean, they weren't very nice to him, were they?
They were not very nice to me at all. No.
Basically bullied him into selling cigarettes. He tried selling them to some of the first years, but they weren't like very interested. And I don't know if you remember the scene with the garden. So a lot of scenes were sort of shot in like a garden and a shed next to the school.
Yeah.
The Peace Garden. And the lads were using the sheds to like smoking. But for some bizarre reason, they'd keep the cigarettes in there as well. And that just seemed really strange to me. Like, Barry went in, and Mick, you say about them not being very nice, Mick said if he had no cigarettes, then he couldn't hang around with them. And I just think, you're trying to be the big I am, but you're acting like you're 5 years old. You know what I mean? But Barry this time had cigarettes because he said the woman had saved him this time because there was no one else in the shop. And a lot of things sort of happened with that, where Ray overheard that the gang bullying a first year who'd been selling cigarettes for them. And he went to the school newspaper with it. And the lads caught him, like, sort of listening to them and told him, like, to mind his own business, just give him a little bit of a gentle nudge, which, to me, Ray always seemed like quite a hard lad. And then to see him sort of, like, a little bit terrified as well. Yeah. And I think that shows how good, like I've said about, the fact that Joe Poby as Mick was so good, but also the fact that he had Frank backing him up as well.
Oh, do you know what? He was 6'5", Chris. It's right. Chris, isn't it?
Yeah.
Chris, yeah. 6'5" he was. Of what, 14 years old?
Yeah.
Massive.
But there was always someone like that at school. wasn't it? There was always one, at least one lad who would be the lad going in the shop getting the ciggies and the drink for everyone of 14 because he looked like they were 25. You know what I mean? The lads then got worried that the story about them smoking would be in the school newspaper and they wanted it stopped. So they threatened Ray again, and they were watching Justine. Now, the story was printed, but the lads were determined not to let anyone read it. So they went round grabbing all the copies of it. There's a line where Mick says that Justine's not going to stop until we're all expelled. And then Justine was attacked. I don't know if you remember that one. She got pushed into the lockers.
Yes.
And she was knocked unconscious. You never actually find out who it definitely was.
It's probably us.
But do you know who actually? Do you know who it actually was?
No,
who done
I
it?
think it was insinuated that it was us.
Yeah.
Probably wasn't Barry.
All the fingers pointed towards the lads, like, and the lads found out that Alice and her mates had been using the shed that they'd been smoking in, and like I said about the fact that they were keeping the cigarettes in there, and the cigarettes got nicked, and they thought that Alice had also nicked their cigarettes because of that. So they roughed her up, and she told Justine, who said, "Right, Mick, I've got you now." So Justine played them a tape that she'd edited, making it sound like Mrs. Keel, who was now the head, had spoken to the police about getting the police in for the lad, getting the first years to sell cigarettes. So the lads got worried and ended up flushing all the cigarettes down the toilet so they wouldn't get caught. And that was also the year of like all the fighting and the gangs and all that. And there was that massive fight with St. Joe's on the waste ground.
Yeah.
So I ask everyone who's been on, who was there for that scene.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like every kid in North London was there.
Yeah, was there.
Was there.
They bust them in, didn't they? Coaches of us.
So what are your memories of filming that?
I remember it being quite exciting.
Right.
It was filmed, I think, on what is now Westfield Stratford Shopping Centre. So it's opposite White City Film Studios. I think it was filmed across the way from there. And we had great fun doing that.
Yeah.
It was a great love. You got to think we're 14, 15-year-old lads, loads of us, and then they're bussing in loads of 14, 15-year-old girls. So it was all right with that.
So it was that kind of fun, was it? Right, okay.
Right. So that too much happened. But it was fantastic, I mean, I always got on with the supporting cast, the extras and stuff. We always had a great time. There was just more people to have a great time with.
Yeah.
I remember it fondly.
Yeah, because I know Alan Cave, I've mentioned this a few times. Alan Cave said he was terrified.
Right, yeah, but he was one of the younger, more timid kids anyway. Because he wasn't really like his character.
Right.
Alan. He wasn't, because his character was, he was a bit cocksure, actually, now I remember. But he was a bit more timid in a crowd, let's say that.
Yeah. Yeah, he just said there was these lads there. He said to me, I'm convinced he was smoking crack and all kinds, to be honest.
Right.
Because there was, I mean, when you look at that, there are some huge units in those scenes, like.
Yeah.
And then obviously, just as the fight's about to kick off, that's when Justine and Chrissy and the baby turn up, and those three manage to disperse the fights and stop it all happening, like, and one solitary police car.
Yeah,
it turns up as well. Like, so we move on from that, and the gang decided that they were going to do some vandalism in the toilet, but they ended up getting a soaking, which I love because you just see obviously Mick and Frank more than anyone walk out, and they've obviously whatever went on in makeup that day, like just someone just emptying water, buckets of water over their head or whatever, and they ended up getting a soaking and just walking out the toilets. And there was a collection organised for Miss Janowitz, who was leaving, and the gang decided they were going to get their hands on that money. So they followed Richard out of school and they hid from him. But in the meantime, Richard got a lift from someone he knew. And when they went looking for him, the lads thought he'd vanished completely into thin air. But they were still determined to get the money. So you mentioned earlier on the fashion show.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the lads decided that they were going to go to the
Yeah.
fashion show. Now, I know they were after that money, but it just seemed bizarre that they would even entertain the idea of going to school when they didn't have to, and going to a fashion show, like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And they actually got hold of the money. Well, the money,
20 quid, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 20 quid. The pencil case with the money in went missing. And once again, everyone assumed it was the lads. And it probably was, wasn't it? Because Ray saw them the next day in the news agents buying a load of cigarettes. So Ray got a gang of his mates together to go after the gang. Like, the gang were all smoking and drinking in the bike sheds. But before they got there and before they could do anything, Mr. Robson, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Hankin, and Mr. Brisley all turned up and stopped the fight before it actually happened. Like, and they sent the gang to Mrs. Keel's office, and they were expelled. Now, that was the story, was they were excluded there.
Yeah.
And we mentioned earlier on, you still weren't expecting to leave at this point.
No.
Okay, because because Series 16 starts and Barry's back at school. Barry turns up at school on his own.
Yeah.
Without the rest of the gang. And once people realised he wasn't with the gang and he wasn't with Neil, who'd inexplicably disappeared, once they realised on his own, they all started giving him grief, especially the girls.
The first year girls,
Yeah.
which I never got. I thought, why wouldn't it be the people that he'd been terrorising?
Yeah.
It's these girls that probably wouldn't even have known him.
Now, also, that was the year when your sister joined.
Linda joined, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, was that weird having your little sister there all of a sudden?
No, because I'd worked with Belinda before.
Right.
So Belinda really got into acting. I think I was doing a commercial.
Uh-huh.
And Belinda was there with my mum because my mum was chaperoning me. So she was waiting around and she had my sister.
Uh-huh.
And someone on the crew said, look, this would be really good if we could can we use Belinda?
Yeah.
So they brought Belinda on, and because we interacted well together, because obviously being brother and sister. And it sort of went from there. So she got signed up and she started doing some stuff. So we've done a few commercials together.
Yeah.
So we'd worked together before. I've always got on well with Belinda. We've always been really close.
Uh-huh.
So it was my older brother Terry, me and Belinda, we sort of grew up together. And then my younger siblings came sort of, there's a 10-year gap then between my younger siblings. So it was us three that sort of grew up together. So I've always been close to Belinda. And it was lovely having her there.
Yeah.
Yeah, really nice.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've just mentioned the fact that the girls were all chasing him around the school. Not for the reason why a lad would want to get chased around the school by a gang of girls. He actually ended up hiding in the toilets from them until Jacko and his mates came in and chased him out. And the girls chased him again until he fell over. And as he falls over, the girls are all laughing at him until a look of horror on their face as Mick, Frank and Grimbo came walking around the corner.
That was a duff, wasn't it?
Yeah, it definitely was. Definitely was a duff. So obviously the lads were back in school and they were still making Barry's life a bit of a misery by this time, getting him to go and breaking into the lockers to try and get money. And Natasha Stevens found him trying to break into the lockers, and she was convinced, because this was when her diary had gone missing and was getting sort of like photocopied around the school and stuff. And she was convinced he had her diary, but this one time he didn't. He wasn't responsible for it. But shit sticks, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there was actually a page of the diary which was like slagging the lads off, and Mick said they needed to show the school who was in charge. And in the very next scene, Barry and Grimbo are there having a go at a first year because they've just decided, look, we need to show that we're top dogs. But when they're having a go at this first year, Jacko and his mates come over and see him and send him away. And Barry's thing was like, you wait till Mick hears about this. You know what I mean? So even then, it's like, you wait till Mick hears about it. But what happened in that series was the gang had to take part in the community action scheme. like sort of helping out in the community as a way of
Right.
showing the fact that they were trying to turn over a new leaf. So it was more about Frank and Grimbo, this
Didn't they go to an
storyline.
old people's home?
So that they actually went to work in an old lady's house,
Right.
right? And they were on Mick had them. Mick couldn't believe they weren't robbing stuff from the
Right.
house. But Mick and Barry were working together. But can you remember what their placement was?
Um, no, I can't.
So, so, so Barry and Mick were working in a nursery.
Really?
Yeah. And there's a scene where they were there in the working in the nursery, and I'm sorry, I've got to say this. Barry's actually like, and Barry's like, you see, there's a scene where they're there, and Barry's sort of just like building stuff with Lego.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
because Mick's saying this is a joke, there's some, and Barry's saying, well, get involved. And he's like, well, why? And he goes, because it helps pass the time, doesn't it? Like, but yeah, that's what they were working in a nursery. And I was going to ask you if you liked working with like the younger kids, but you don't remember doing it, so that would be a
No.
pointless question. Now, there was a scene in a nightclub, which I always liked when Grange Hill did stuff like that, because that's what kids who were 15, 16, 17 do. Like
Oh yeah.
when I was in sixth form, that it was part of the week. Like you went to school all week, and then on Friday, you all went out to the same club where you knew
Yeah.
you were going to get in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You would let you in, so you all went there. And I've mentioned about the fact that Frank and Grimbo were working in the old lady's house, and Mick was telling them that they needed to like start robbing from it. Like he couldn't believe that she had all this stuff and they didn't, and they never stole anything, but they did steal a locket, and then they were expelled. So Frank and Grimbo were expelled, and it was just leaving Barry and Mick in the school, and the media room in the school got burgled, and like all the equipment was stolen. And once again, everyone assumed that it was Barry and Mick. And I think it was Gabriel, Darren Kempson, put the
Yeah.
fright
Yeah. I remember Darren. Yeah.
put the frighteners on them by saying that all the equipment had ultraviolet dye on. So and they could be in big trouble. And like I say, everyone assumes it's them two. But there's a scene later on where Barry asks Mick if he actually did it, which suggests, Barry didn't do it. And Mick just said, it's funny that, Barry, I was going to ask you the same thing. And so you never quite know if Mick actually was involved or not. It stands to reason that maybe Mick actually did do it. Like, now, you mentioned before about not having a classroom.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to tell you that you're wrong on this one.
Oh no way.
Because Barry and Mick were it was their 50th year, and they were doing GCSE art,
Right.
right? So they forced a lad called Gary to do their homework for them, and it was supposed to be self-portraits. So this lad Gary did portraits of them, and he went to Mr. Brisley, Adam Ray,
Yeah.
and he realised what they'd done. Right? He said, "There's no way that's their work." So he got them to draw a portrait of this other lad Gary in the class. And obviously Barry's portrait was nowhere near as good as the one he'd claimed he'd drawn earlier. And because of that, and this was quite a big storyline where they found out that Mr. Brisley was gay.
Yeah.
Right. And it was Barry that started telling everyone, because obviously the way he treats them over the art. And especially as Mr. Brisley was going to be the umpire in the cricket.
Yeah.
And that cricket scene it's a really, really powerful scene, I think.
Yeah.
Because obviously, as he's walking out, Barry's the one who starts all the lads chanting. And they're all chanting it until Mick steps in. And Mick says that line of he might be, but he's ours. So you're going to leave him alone. And everyone sort of stops there. Now, that was like the last sort of scene that you were in on screen in Grange
Oh,
Hill.
really?
Yeah.
You're making me want to go back and watch all these.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm putting an episode of a podcast out, put a picture clip online each day for people to try and work out who it's going to be. And the person that guesses first gets to ask the next guest a question on who it's going
But
to be.
someone guessed right, did they?
Well, yours has only just gone out this week. So yours will be, the question for this one will be on the next one. But before I actually ask you the question that's been sent in, I've got a little bit of an apology to any of the listeners, any of the followers, because we're recording this the day before this is going out. So we're recording this on the Friday night, and I've been putting picture clues out since Monday. Now, the first picture clue I put out was a picture of the cast of Friends. This is the first time I've ever talked about this properly on here. And the reason I did a picture of the cast of Friends was because, do you know why it would be a picture of the cast of Friends? That would be one of the picture clues.
Yes, I do.
Go on, which is?
It was produced by David Crane.
Right, so David Crane is the writer, creator, producer of Friends.
And which is why I had to change my name when
right,
made 16.
Right, okay. And so the next picture clue was a picture of Lofty, the crane from Bob the Builder. Now, that was Tuesday. On Tuesday, the number of people who were then certain, because Ross was in Friends and because Lofty was the picture, they put 2 and 2 together and came up with Sue Tully, because she was she was Suzanne Ross in Grange Hill, and she married Lofty in EastEnders. So I started having a little bit of fun with this then. So I then thought, right, how can I keep people on the track of Sue Tully? So my picture on Wednesday then became a picture of David Ross. He was the original Crichton in Red Dwarf.
Right.
So I got the Ross in again.
Right.
And I couldn't believe this happened. There is a Gaelic footballer called Barry Tully. So I managed to get that one online. So people were convinced that it was Sue Tully. And so then today, people started realizing, a couple of people had realized that I could be giving them a bum steer throughout the week. Someone actually on Tuesday said, I think it's David Crane. I think it's Barry Timpson. And then today I put a picture on. There's a road by where I live called Walton Vale, which is like a little shopping high street. And I got a picture up there from a long time ago with the shop Timpson's. So it just says Timpson on it. Yeah. And everyone sort of realized then, like, I can't. So I have to apologize to the listeners for sending you on the bum steer. I had no intention of playing the Sue Tully card until 99% of you were convinced that it was Sue Tully. So I thought, right, let's go along with that one. So anyway, bringing us back to this one. So the question I've got, it's from someone called Dominic Butler. And Dominic's question is, Dominic has actually also drawn the portrait for this episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's very different to any question we've had before. So,
okay.
So David, you find a time machine.
Yeah.
You go back in time onto the set of Grange Hill being filmed, and you see the young David Crane playing Barry Timpson with all his aspirations, expectations, and hang-ups. You wait for his break. You sit beside him, and he's all ears. What are you saying to him?
I'd be telling him to behave his bloody self. Yeah, and if you want to continue acting, you need to sort it out. Honestly, I was a nightmare.
Right.
I didn't take things seriously. I just sort of had an expectation that I would just go on forever being an actor.
Uh-huh.
And life didn't turn out like that. But yeah, I didn't take it seriously enough, and I would have gone back and had a word with myself for sure.
Yeah.
Good. Because I was surrounded by some fantastic actors.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself to be one of those. But I was. I mean, John Pickard was amazing as Neil Timpson. Uh-huh. He was way better than I was.
Right.
Jamie Lahane was brilliant. God, I could name them all. Natalie Poyser, the Buckfields.
Yeah.
Ian Steele.
Yeah.
Otis.
Yeah.
God, it's hard to name them all. They were all fantastic. Margot Selby.
Yeah.
Loved Margot Selby. Yeah. She was amazing. We had so much fun with Margot. What a brilliant character she was. She would light up a room. She was always but she was very mischievous as well.
Right, okay.
She was a bloody nightmare. I remember the first day I ever met Margot when we all joined us. I say first years because I joined with them, Natalie Poyser and all that. I joined with them, so I felt like a first year because it was my first year coming in. And Margot Selby was throwing cream cakes at people across the bloody table. She was amazing fun, really good fun.
Yeah.
But that's what I would say to myself. Yeah, behave yourself.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, nice one. Now you just mentioned something there a little bit earlier on because on the IMDb page for you for David Crane, it stops at Grange Hill. But I know for a fact that you were in more things after Grange Hill. So what's happened there then?
I had to change my name.
Right.
There was already a David Crane by Equity. Coming into adult equity, couldn't have the same. Paul Adams did the same. He became Paul Paris.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few people that had to change their name. David Shane, I became that. I think it was someone in Sylvie's office that said, "Look, why don't you use David Shane? No one else got it. It sounds like your name." So I just went with David Shane. So that's the name I acted under from then on.
Yeah, and I mean, you had like quite a bit because I'm looking at some of the things, and you mentioned Brian Conley there earlier on. So there was a pilot episode first, was there? There was Outside Chance.
Outside Chance,
right? Because you played Robbie Conway, but then that became Time After Time.
Time After Time,
right. And you were in that pretty much.
Did that for 2 series.
Yeah.
That done really well. That was really good. And then Brian, we was going to go 3rd series. That got commissioned, and Brian got offered the chance to take Jolson to, I think, Australia.
Right. Yeah.
He loved singing.
Yeah.
He did a brilliant Jolson. And so he decided to take that to, I think it was Australia. So we never did the 3rd series, which we was all gutted about because we all wanted to do it.
Yeah.
It went down really well, that series. It was fantastic. Yeah, really enjoyed that.
And getting to work with Brian Conley.
He was, honestly, you couldn't meet a nicer chap.
Yeah.
Brian Conley, he was wonderful.
You mentioned about how funny he was, but he used to have that Saturday night program, and like Nick Frisbee and Dangerous Brian and all that. Would he do stuff like that? Like, would he just break into them characters? Like, just
no, not them characters, but he was an absolute clown all the time. He just had to. He was all. I'm sure he's exactly the same now.
Yeah,
he always just had to make people feel relaxed and make them laugh. He's just a clown.
Yeah,
he's just so lovely. Neil, I can't tell you how lovely he is. I had so much time for him. He was great. He helped me out a couple of times as well.
Yeah,
he really helped me out. He was great guy.
Excellent. And then there was a couple of other things like the Knock and Back Up. You played 2 episodes.
Back Up,
in that, and there was a program called Dad with George Cole.
Yes, I did 1 episode with that's right, with Daniel Dembiash.
Yeah, and Kevin McNally, and was that?
Yeah, we didn't have a big part in that at all, really.
Right.
And then the last major thing I think I done was The Last Salute.
Yeah.
Yeah, that again, that was probably the most fun I've ever had. That period, we was away filming that. It was all on location.
Yeah.
Down in Wiltshire. And so we just stayed down there pretty much for 10 weeks while we filmed that. And that was amazing.
Because the Paul Bound was in that, wasn't he? From from watching and Philip Jackson.
Philip Jackson, legend.
And then now I've got another couple of things here. Now, as I say, I know IMDb isn't the most. Did you play a character called Barney?
No, I didn't. No, my mum asked me this.
So,
Dave, what's some? You never did a film called Hotel Erotica, did you? I was like, what? She said, it's on your IMDb. I said, no, I didn't do that.
Okay. So, for anyone that's interested, on the David Shane IMDb profile, there is it's just called Hotel Erotica, and so somebody called David Shane is in an episode of it playing a character called Barney. And I'll be honest, that's as far as my research went. Yeah, I just thought, because once when I thought there was a possibility of it being you, I thought there's no way I can watch that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
Oh, brilliant.
and then so we're in deep with Nick Berry.
That was those police officers or something.
Yeah, they were police officers. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just did. Yeah. I don't think it was a big part. It was a small part. I think I played a barman.
right. Yeah, and
Yeah, I
then
think I played a barman.
and then four episodes making that well travelled path from Grange Hill to Albert
Enders.
Square.
To EastEnders
Yeah,
with Joe Povey.
yeah. Now,
Yeah,
me and you spoke the other week,
yeah,
and you told me a cracking story
yeah.
about this. So can you
So,
tell us now, please?
so basically, yeah, I didn't actually audition for the part. I got a phone call to say that one of the assistant directors from Grange Hill is now directing a block of episodes of EastEnders. And
Right,
would I be available to come in and play a part against Joe Povey,
right.
his character Jules in EastEnders?
Yeah,
So I went into Elstree, another home from home, and I had a sit down chat. And I said, "Listen, we don't want Joe to know it's you,
right.
so we want it to be a surprise for Joe." So that was it. I agreed to do it, and then I turned up there. Joe had no idea who he was playing against, and then I just show up, and we have like a bit of a reunion. It was wonderful. It was
Brilliant.
lovely to see Joe again. I've not
Yeah,
actually seen Joe since.
right.
I'd love to have a chat with Joe. I did recently get back in touch with Jamie Golding.
Oh yeah, yeah,
We had a chat,
yeah. Good
and
lad, Jamie. I like Jamie. Yeah, he's a good
yeah,
lad.
but
Yeah,
you got to get Joe on.
yeah. Definitely.
Have you
No,
tried to get hold of Joe?
I've not had any. I've not got any contact details. So, Joe, if
Right.
you're listening, or if anyone knows any contact details for him, send them my way. So
I
we
know
can.
I think he's still doing stuff.
Yeah, I think he is. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And then that's the last thing then that
Yep.
I've seen on IMDb. So did you take did you take a conscious step away from acting, or
No, so what happened was it would have been shortly after EastEnders.
uh
I forget what year it was. But in between acting jobs, I was a motorcycle courier.
right?
One of them jobs where you can just do it, drop it,
Yeah.
and go off and do your castings. So it wasn't didn't have a sort of permanent position. So I used to just run around London on a motorcycle, and I had a terrible accident, and I broke
Oh,
my
right.
legs, uh, amongst other things, and I smashed my right leg up so bad I couldn't walk properly for about 3 years.
Wow.
And I tried to come back, and I did get a part in a documentary about the Herald of Free Enterprise
Oh, yeah.
ferry that sunk in
Yeah, yeah.
Zeebrugge.
Yeah.
So I had a part on that. But when it come to it, I had to pull out because I had to do a load of running and swimming. And I used to just sort of, I had a really strong limp.
Right.
I had to say to them, look, guys, I'm not going to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So I spoke to my agent, it would have been Sylvie at the time, and I said, look, I'm going to need to take some time out and get well. And it was over 3 years
Wow.
before I could walk properly again. And by
Wow.
that time, I'd taken a position for a company that I was couriering for at the time. It was a print company.
Uh-huh.
Um, when I had my accident, they agreed to bring me into the office, so I had to have 16 weeks off work. And
Yeah.
they said, look, come into the office and just work in here, and we'll pay you. So
Yeah.
I'd obviously had a mortgage at the time. I had my twins by then.
Yeah.
So that would have told you how long ago it was. My twins are 25 this year. So
Right. Okay.
about 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's one of them things. I've now got a mortgage, now got a regular income, and
Yeah.
that was that. So I never went back to it. And I stayed with that company for 21 years. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, I left them about 5, 6 years ago. And I've got my own business.
All right. Okay.
So,
So, am I allowed to ask what your business is?
yeah, so I've got a company that supplies and sells electric carriage doors, believe it or not.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's just what I do.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. And are you still in touch with any of the Grange Hill cast now?
I'm not. I'm not in touch with anyone. The only person I'm in touch with still was one of the guys that was an extra,
Right. Okay.
and he came in the final year, part of the was it the girls' football team?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so you'll see me hanging around with him in that.
Right.
and it's actually Gemma Collins's brother,
All right.
GC. So Russell Collins. So I've kept in touch with him,
Yeah.
and but he's the only one.
And no, because you're still in touch with the girl that played Lucy Mitchell as
Lucy
well.
Mitchell. Yeah, I speak to her now again. Yeah, great. Yeah.
And have you tell me if this is the wrong question to ask, but do you ever have any plans of sort of ever thinking about going back into acting?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely on my to-do list
Oh,
for sure.
brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've
Brilliant.
got a bit of a plan. I want to. It's probably not going to be till I retire. Well, I'll probably go back into it because I need
Uh-huh.
to get rid of my mortgage,
Yeah.
be a bit more comfortable because you need to be available to go for the stuff,
Yeah.
and you can't have a job and then you get another job and you're doing that for 3 months. Your job doesn't wait for you.
Yeah.
So I need to be a bit more comfortable,
Yeah.
or I could do something like that. But yeah, I would love to go back and do it, and I would take it far more seriously. I did towards the end anyway.
Yeah.
Out of my teenage years, I did take it far more seriously,
Uh-huh.
and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
that's I hope.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, we are coming towards the end of the interview, David, and I've got the last few questions that I always ask everyone at
Yep.
the end of every episode. So, over the last couple of years, there's been quite a bit of talk of a Grange Hill movie in the works. Phil Redmond's written it and Sarah Sugarman directing it. What do you think of the idea of a Grange Hill movie?
Yeah, why not?
Brilliant.
Absolutely,
Brilliant. And
that'd be fantastic.
if you were asked, would we
I
see
wouldn't be
it?
asked.
Would
Phil
we
wouldn't
see?
have.
Would
Phil
we
wouldn't
see
have
a
me.
return of Barry Timpson though, if you were asked?
Oh God, yeah, I'd do it. I'd do it in a heartbeat. But yeah, I wasn't one of Phil's favourites, so
Right.
I
Okay.
don't think I'd be asked. Although there could be a good storyline. Old Mick and Barry could have a car dealership somewhere,
Yeah.
or
Bad boys saying good. You know what
yeah.
I mean?
Well, I don't know about how good they'd be, but I reckon, yeah, they'd have a little racket going somewhere.
Some sort of chop shop or something like you
Yeah, yeah,
saying.
yeah. It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting. But yeah, I'd yeah, do it in a heartbeat. Yeah,
Okay. Now you talked earlier on that you said that you'd been a fan
yeah.
of Grange Hill. So other than Barry Timpson, who was your favourite character in Grange Hill?
I always liked Eggs,
Oh yeah, yeah,
Jacko.
yeah,
He had a great character. Um, yeah, maybe being a real bully would have been nice rather than just the twat. That'd have been all right. Playing a Mick or a Grimbo.
yeah.
But yeah, but I can't remember a really nice character I've ever played. To be honest, always
Right.
either played a scally, a thief, a drug dealer, a victim of some awful crime.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I've never really played a particularly nice character.
Right. Okay.
So
But
it'd be nice for a change to play someone a little bit better than that.
yeah, I mean, what is it?
Jacko's Jamie,
Yeah.
God rest his soul, had a fantastic run,
Yeah.
didn't he?
Yeah. But you just said there, what is it they say? It's better to be typecast than not cast, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay,
Sure.
and so if you couldn't have played Barry Timpson, which other character then would you have liked to have played?
Oh, probably Jacko.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, probably something that more suited to my own
Yeah.
personality. Yeah,
I mean, I love Jacko's character because there was so much going on with Jacko
yeah,
as well, wasn't there? You know, and the later stuff with his mum and all
yeah.
that. Like, so there was all that going on.
But Jamie was very much like that character as well. He didn't have to
Right.
try to. I remember someone saying to me many, many years ago, not to try and act too much, but
Yeah.
try and make the character you. And they said it'll only be the people that actually know you that think you're shit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone else will find that really convincing if you just say the lines like it's you.
Yeah.
People that know you won't think you're very good. Everyone else will.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. So the final question then is why do you think there's still such affection for Grange Hill?
It was just a massive part of our growing up, I suppose.
Yeah.
Our generation, anyway. My kids wouldn't know what Grange Hill was.
No.
They have no idea.
Yeah.
I've shown my youngest, my girls understand because I've sort of they would see me on TV when they were young, but my boys are 12 and 8 years old. They're not interested. If I showed them me, the 12, 13-year old,
Yeah.
they'd watch it for 2 minutes and go back to their room. They wouldn't be interested in the
Yeah.
slightest. It's nothing for them. Like when we were young, we were on telly, and that was a
Yeah.
big thing for people. Now anyone can be on telly, can't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a big thing. But yeah, Granger was just a huge part of everyone's life. There was nothing else to watch, was there? We used to get home from school and watch Grange Hill,
Yeah.
compare it to our own lives,
Yeah.
and you generally made your own life feel a bit better
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because it was
Brilliant.
pretty crap, wasn't it? The stuff they used to deal with in Grange Hill,
Yeah.
there was always a scandal going on. There's always some
Yeah.
upset somewhere.
Well, that was it. That was it. Though, wasn't it? Like it was. They were. It wasn't afraid, was it? They
No,
weren't
no, no.
afraid on Grange Hill to tackle low storylines, and
Yeah,
people always quite often say, like, after Just Say No, there was a people say, oh, well, yeah, there was a drop off and all that. But if you
yeah,
think about it, you mentioned earlier on like with Belinda's storyline
yeah.
with the AIDS and all the HIV and all that they weren't afraid to shy away from stuff,
No,
and they did it well.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. The thing with Chrissy and the baby
yeah,
and all the stuff Justine had to do with her
yeah,
boyfriend getting killed and all this, they were amazing as well. She
yeah.
used to terrify me. Sonia Kearns, when I
Oh,
first
right,
joined, she was a bit like the governor on set.
right. Oh, right. Okay.
Like, she was well settled, well established,
Yeah.
didn't take any shit from no one, Sonia.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was lovely to me. We used to share a car actually. Used to pick
All
me
right.
up, then it used to pick her up from Barnet and take us into the studios. And
Yeah.
yeah, always a little bit nervous around Sonia.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's been great talking to you. It's been great. It's been great seeing your face every time I've jogged your memory on something
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Oh, really?
I genuinely, like I've said this quite. My face is there, and I'm going to be honest, because I don't think I've stopped smiling the entire time. Like we've been
Right.
on, like just smiling and laughing. Honestly, my face is there, and no,
Brilliant.
it's been great talking to you. It really, really has. So thank you once again for coming on and doing this. It's been
No,
brilliant.
thank you for being interested, Neil. I've watched a few of your podcasts. I think they're fantastic. It's just great to hear other people's perspective and
Yeah,
experiences and how they remember it. It's often very different to mine,
yeah.
but
Oh
yeah,
no,
amazing.
no,
Thanks for having me on.
no, not at all. Not at all. Thanks so much. It's been brilliant. And to anyone that's listening, I'll speak to you next time. Cheers. Thanks.
Cheers. Take
Bye
care.
bye.